So back in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, Jacksonville, Oregon was very much an abandoned city, if you will. Oh, sure, people lived here, but it was in disarray and disrepair. The whole city was, including the cemetery. And it wasn't until the 60s and the 70s when we moved here as a family that they started really fixing the place up. And I remember this building in the middle. The one to the left was not here, but the one in the middle was. It was falling apart. It was all boarded up. And at one point they had it opened up to the public. And I remember going in there and seeing it. And there's a great big hole in the floor where they would bring the cadavers up here and they would store them under the ground until they were ready to bury him. Yeah, it's kind of gross and everything, but we'll look at some of the plaques here. Alrighty, here's a nice big plaque outside this new building that has not been here forever. So it's giving you a lot of information here. So the building we're talking about is A there, and that's the Sexton Tool House. And now this B building, this is new. That's what was added. Gives you a lot of good information. Over here, brochures and whatnot. I guess you can donate. We got another big plaque here. This was not up here last time I was up here. So you can actually pause it here and read that if you would like. I guess we can go in. Oh, excuse me. No, nobody's here. Wow, this has a really very, very old smell to it. Wow. Well, a lot of information. This building's been here for a number of years, but you couldn't come into it like this. Very old chair. Wow, I wish I had time. Just a lot of information about the cemetery. And here I talked about the gate being rebuilt. That's what it looked like before, and now apparently that's going to come back and be better than ever. Yeah, that's going to be cool. That has always been there, down there. It wasn't until I came up here last week that I noticed it was gone. Yeah. Wow, it smells very, very antique-y and old in here. This is really, really nice. I imagine this gets locked up at night because, unfortunately, Jacksonville does have homeless people. They have to lock up all the public restrooms. So this building is apparently not open. So that's what this building is for, is to hold the cadavers. Back in the old days, they of course don't use that anymore for such things. There's a lot of really old graves here. Over in this section is some really popular ones. Well, I don't mean popular, but like Peter Brett is buried over there. And Beekman, and just huge giant headstones, as you can see. Big, big headstones. I don't really have time or desire to go walking around here too much, but it's a wonderful place to come and visit. I highly recommend it. Look at that. That's how they used to do it back in the old days. That's all marble. That's a lot of work. These are all hundreds of years old. Wonderful old graveyard. Old fence here. Gabrielle Plymale died 1852. 18 years old. That is really, really old. Look at that full grown tree growing inside there. Probably been growing since about 1852. Look at this. Wow, you just don't see graves like that too often. There's only a handful in here that are like as elaborate as this. So that's the road we came up, the flagpole in the center. To the best of my knowledge, this is the original entrance to the cemetery right here. So it started out as this small little area, and of course has gotten much bigger. I don't think they have too many burials up here anymore. Seems to me I do know somebody up here that was buried in this section, but it would have been from way back in the 1970s. There's somebody that was born in 1825. Wow. Died in 1877. Look at all that marble. Huge. That's just huge. So as I said, this would be the oldest section. Let's see if we can find any of those wooden grave markers. John Hawking Yos died 1873, age 28 years. I think the wooden gravestones would be somewhere over in this section. Well, here's another grave that I know of. Didn't know it was here, and that's Charlie Offenbacher. My dad knew him. He was a state policeman, I believe. And he died in 1986, and that would be about right. Yeah, old Charlie Offenbacher. I delivered newspapers to his house, so that must have been his wife. That died in 15. Wow. Didn't know that they were buried up here. Well, I am unable to locate any wooden markers. They would look like this right here. These flat ones. And I know there were a few in this area, and now they are gone. It is possible that they were stolen, because they would be very, very old. Lyle Hartman died in 1983, I remember him. And then William H. Hartman died in 1985. And then we have Wes Hartman, who I personally knew. I met him, who's one, I guess would be Lyle Hartman's son. I met Wes Hartman a few years ago, somewhere around 2013, through my workplace, and talked to him a couple of times, and then he suddenly had a brain tumor. They discovered a brain tumor, so they operated on him and removed it. He came back. I saw him a couple times, but he was never the same. He was just obviously altered. And then the tumor came back, and that was the end of that. They couldn't save him. So Wes died in October 15. Wes Hartman wasn't much older than me. I was born in 1960. He was born in 57. Rest in peace, Wes. Also, another piece of the movie was filmed right down here. I'll go ahead and share the little clip I made. And now we come to the farthest point south that we can get. The road is right down there. And this is a friend of my sister and her first husband, Tracy Gunlock. I didn't know him. I guess I'd seen him around. Born in 65, he died in 1986. He was actually murdered in town. I remember hearing the story of his murder, and very sad. Just a young kid. Okay, I just got a handful of graves to look at here, and then we'll be right back to where Mom and Dad are buried at. Okay, here is Wendell Matheny, born in 1917, died in 1970. My dad knew him. He ran like a little fix-it-up shop type thing right in town. I remember him. Here we have a giant gravesite for the Hackerts. We lived across the street from the Hackerts when we lived up on Oregon Street. So over here we have Albert Hackett, Mr. Hackett as I knew him, passed away in 2001, born in 1902. And Dorothy Hackett, his wife, Mrs. Hackett, they lived across the street from us there on Oregon Street. Great big home they had. That must be a child over there. I remember him well. Mr. Hackett was the sexton up here at the cemetery before Wayne Maxson was. And here is Omar, born in 1905, died in 1987. I went to his funeral here in Jacksonville. I did not know his wife. He had remarried because his first wife had died in 1966. Omar worked, when I got out of high school, I went to work at Southern Oregon Sales, SOS Packing House. Yeah, I worked in the fruit, and Omar worked there. He was much older than me. He just was one of those guys that retired from his job and just wanted to keep on working. I loved Omar. He was a great guy. Really missed him. And then finally, the McIntyres, Ronald and Frances. Apparently Frances is still alive, but Ron McIntyre passed away in 2003. He owned Ron's Market up in the Applegate. I knew him because I knew his son. I went to school with his son. And here is his son, David McIntyre, born in 1960, died in 2013. We weren't the best of friends. We had our ups and downs, but I've known him since I started school in 1966. Didn't see him for after high school, but I knew he was around, and apparently he had just been here visiting in April, and he was driving back home to his home in Montana when he suffered a heart attack and died while driving. David McIntyre. Knew him almost my whole life. Well, that's going to be it for this. I think that's about it. I didn't cover a lot of the big famous graves. I should have, I guess, but it's going to take a long time. Maybe I'll come back up here someday and we'll go through the real big famous graves and have another part to this. So now we're going to go down here to Mom and Dad's grave. It's been a fun day. I don't feel like leaving. Although I'm tired and want to go home. It's very nice and peaceful up here. Mom and Dad's grave overlooked the city, such as it is. Oh, that bench sitting there looks good, doesn't it? I think I'll sit down and drink my bottle of water.